The steel vault echoed with the sudden, violent sound of a heavy deadbolt sliding into place. "Lock the doors!" Dominic snarled, his cold eyes sweeping over the trembling, plus-size woman cornered in the shadows. He thought he had just captured a lowly corporate spy. He had no idea the woman shrinking from his brutal gaze was his fiercely mourned, long-dead fiancée. The rain in Chicago was unforgiving that Tuesday night, slicking the pavement of Rush Street like a sheet of black ice. Harper Lane sat at her desk in the back office of Pinnacle Logistics, a mundane shell company that paid her well enough to keep her mouth shut and her head down. At 28, Harper had built a quiet, invisible life. She was a fat woman in a world that often overlooked her, and she preferred it that way. Her soft, generous curves, thick thighs, and round stomach were enveloped in a comfortable, oversized wool cardigan. She took up space physically, but in the gritty, dangerous underworld of the city, she made herself small. She was just finishing the month's reconciliations when the front doors of the office imploded. Shattered glass rained across the linoleum. Heavy tactical boots stomped through the reception area. Harper gasped, knocking over her lukewarm coffee as three men in tailored, dark suits, not police uniforms, swarmed her cramped office. "Grab the books, grab the hard drives, and grab the bookkeeper," a man with a jagged scar across his jaw commanded. His name was Leo, a notoriously brutal enforcer for the Castile crime family. "Wait, I don't know anything!" Harper shrieked, pressing her back against the filing cabinet. Her chest heaved, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was heavy, but they were merciless. Two men grabbed her by the arms, their grips like iron vices biting into her plush skin. A rough canvas bag was yanked over her head, plunging her into suffocating darkness. The distinct smell of expensive leather, gun oil, and rain filled her lungs as she was dragged out into the freezing October night and shoved into the back of an idling SUV. For nearly an hour, Harper sat in blind terror, the vehicle weaving through the city before the pavement smoothed out, indicating they had hit the private, sprawling estates of Winnetka. She didn't pray. She hadn't prayed in 9 years, not since the night her entire world had been swallowed by fire. She just focused on breathing, feeling the soft weight of her own body pressing into the leather seats, a grounding reality in a nightmare that was spiraling out of control. When the vehicle finally stopped, she was hauled out, her legs trembling under her weight, and dragged down a flight of concrete stairs. The air grew damp and metallic. She was pushed into a chair, the zip ties around her wrists digging into her flesh. The canvas bag was ripped from her head. Harper blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights. She was in a windowless concrete room, a bunker. The heavy steel door behind her slammed shut. Then the shadows parted, and the devil himself walked in. Dominic Castile was a man carved from violence and ruthless ambition. At 32, the Don of the Castile Syndicate was terrifyingly handsome, with jet-black hair, sharp, predatory features, and eyes the color of a bruised winter sky. He wore a charcoal bespoke suit that clung to his broad shoulders, exuding a quiet, lethal authority. "Lock the doors!" Dominic snarled, not even looking back at his men. The deadbolt slid into place with a sickening clack. Dominic slowly turned his gaze to Harper. He didn't see a person. He saw a loose end. To him, she was just a nameless, faceless pawn who had been moving dirty money for his Russian rivals. "I'm going to make this very simple for you," Dominic said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. He dragged a metal chair across the room and sat backwards on it, leaning his arms over the backrest, staring directly into her pale, terrified face. "You have the decryption keys to the offshore accounts. You are going to give them to me. And if you don't, I will have Leo peel you apart." Harper swallowed hard, her double chin trembling slightly, though a strange, defiant spark ignited in her chest. "I'm a bookkeeper. I punch numbers into a spreadsheet. I don't have decryption keys, and I don't know who you are." Dominic's eyes narrowed. He took in her appearance. She was not the typical hardened criminal or sleek, polished honey trap he was used to interrogating. She was soft, flush-faced, her dark brown hair falling in messy waves around her round face. She was undeniably beautiful, with full lips and large, expressive amber eyes. But she was a fat woman who looked completely out of her depth in his torture chamber. Yet, looking at her eyes, a strange, phantom ache flared in the center of Dominic's chest, or a ghost of a memory. No. He buried the thought instantly. "Do not lie to me," Dominic whispered, rising to his feet. He stepped into her personal space, towering over her. The scent of his cologne, cedar, bergamot, and smoke, washed over Harper, and it hit her like a physical blow. Her breath hitched. She knew that scent. Suddenly, the cold, concrete room seemed to smile. Harper stared into the icy blue eyes of her captor, and beneath the hardened lines of the ruthless Mafia boss, she saw the ghost of the boy who had once slipped a diamond ring onto her finger in a sunlit garden in Palermo. Dominic. Her Dominic. 9 years ago, Harper Lane did not exist. 9 years ago, she was Josephine Rossi, the 19-year-old heiress to the Rossi crime family. She had been a petite, blonde, sheltered girl, deeply in love with the young heir of the Castile syndicate. Their arranged marriage was supposed to unite Chicago's underworld. But 2 weeks before the wedding, a rival faction ambushed Josephine's convoy on the I-90 expressway. The car exploded. Her family was wiped out, and Josephine was presumed dead, her body supposedly lost in the inferno. But she hadn't died. Thrown from the vehicle into the embankment, she had been rescued by a rogue paramedic who helped her disappear, knowing the hit was an inside job. To survive, Josephine had shed her identity completely. Over the years of hiding, trauma, and poverty, her body had changed. The extreme stress and a thyroid condition caused her to gain over 80 pounds. She dyed her blonde hair a mousy brown, changed her name to Harper, and embraced her new, invisible life as a plus-size bookkeeper. She had mourned Dominic every single day, believing he was part of the brutal world that had slaughtered her family. And now, he was standing right in front of her, threatening to kill her. "I said," Dominic growled, slamming his fist onto the metal table beside her, making her jump. "Where are the keys?" "I don't have them," Harper yelled back, her voice cracking. "You dragged the wrong woman out of that office. You think because I'm fat and sitting behind a desk, I must be the mastermind's trusted vault. I'm nobody." Dominic tilted his head, his blue eyes studying her intensely. There was a fire in her amber eyes that unsettled him. It was a fierce, defensive rage he hadn't seen in almost a decade. He hated it. It made the old scars in his heart itch. "Nobody," Dominic sneered, reaching out and grabbing her jaw with one large, calloused hand. His thumb pressed against her soft cheek. He expected her to flinch, to cry. Instead, Harper glared up at him, her chest heaving. People who work for the Volkovs are never nobody. They are rats. "Let go of me," she hissed, jerking her head out of his grip. Dominic's eyes darkened. "You have a lot of nerve for someone that's sitting in a chair they'll likely die in." "Strip her coat," he barked at Leo, who had been standing silently by the door. "Let's see if she's hiding flash drives on her." "No, don't touch me," Harper panicked, thrashing in the chair as Leo approached. "Hold her still," Dominic commanded coldly. Leo grabbed Harper's left shoulder, his rough hands pulling harshly at the thick wool cardigan. Harper fought back, throwing her weight against the bindings, kicking her legs out. In the violent scuffle, Leo yanked the cardigan down, and the neckline of Harper's silk blouse tore open, exposing her left collarbone and the top of her left breast. "Stop!" Harper screamed, tears of humiliation finally springing to her eyes as she shrank back, trying to cover her exposed plush flesh with her tied hands. "Leo, back off!" Dominic snapped, holding up a hand. The enforcer stepped away immediately. Dominic stepped forward, his jaw tight, intending to search her himself. He looked down in irritation, but as his eyes landed on her exposed skin, his entire body froze. The air in the room seemed to instantly evaporate. There, just below her left collarbone, resting on the soft slope of her chest, was a very distinct, jagged burn scar shaped perfectly like a crescent moon. Beside it was a tiny, faded birthmark that looked like a drop of ink. Dominic stopped breathing. The blood rushed in his ears, a deafening roar. "Does it hurt?" a young Dominic had asked, his fingers gently tracing the crescent burn on 19-year-old Josephine's chest, an injury she had gotten from a stray firework as a child. "Only when I think about it," she had smiled, leaning into his chest. Dominic stumbled a half-step backward, bumping into the metal table. His face, usually an impenetrable mask of stone, completely shattered. His eyes wide, he looked from the scar to her round, tear-stained face, then down to her thick thighs, then back up to her amber eyes. The hair was wrong. The body was vastly different. The name was wrong. But the eyes, the amber eyes, filled with that defiant, desperate fire. "Leo!" Dominic choked out, his voice sounding hollow, as if it belonged to a ghost. "Get out!" "Boss? We haven't even—" "I said get the hell out!" Dominic roared, pulling his firearm from his holster and slamming it onto the table in a blind fury. Leo didn't hesitate. He practically ran from the room, pulling the heavy steel door shut behind him. The deadbolt clicked open, then shut again from the outside. Silence descended on the concrete bunker, heavy and suffocating. Harper was hyperventilating, trying desperately to pull the torn edges of her blouse over the crescent scar, but her hands were still zip-tied. She couldn't hide it. She knew he had seen it. The jig was up. 9 years of hiding. 9 years of transforming herself, all stripped away in a damp basement in Vinetka. Dominic slowly dropped to his knees in front of her chair. The immaculate, terrifying Don of the Castile family was kneeling on the dirty concrete floor. His hands were shaking violently as he reached out, hovering his fingers just inches from the torn fabric of her shirt, terrified that if he touched her, she would vanish into ash like she had all those years ago. "Josie," he whispered, his voice cracking, tearing in half. Harper sobbed, the sound wrenching out of her throat. She closed her eyes, the tears spilling over her cheeks and dripping down to her soft jawline. "Don't call me that," she cried, turning her face away from him. Josie died on that highway. Oh my God, Dominic gasped, a ragged, ugly sound escaping his lips. He grabbed a pocket knife from his suit coat and frantically sliced through the thick plastic zip ties binding her wrists. The moment her hands were free, she didn't hit him, and she didn't run. She just brought her hands up to cover her face, sobbing into her palms. Dominic surged forward, burying his face into her soft stomach, wrapping his massive arms around her waist as if she were the only anchor in a storm. He didn't care that her body had changed. He didn't care that she was heavier, or that her hair was brown, or that she was dressed in cheap clothes. He gripped her thick waist, pulling her flush against his chest, his shoulders shaking as the ruthless Mafia boss finally broke down. You're alive, he wept into her shirt, inhaling the scent of vanilla and rain that clung to her. My beautiful girl, my Josie, you're alive. Harper hesitated, her hands hovering over his dark hair. The man holding her was a killer, a monster who had just threatened to end her life. But the man crying into her lap was the boy who had sworn to protect her. Slowly, she let her hands fall, her fingers tangling into his jet-black hair. I'm not the girl you remember, Dom, she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow. I'm not her anymore. Dominic pulled his head back, looking up at her round face. His thumb reached up, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. I don't give a damn, he said fiercely, his blue eyes blazing with a dark, terrifying obsession. You are mine. You have always been mine. And I will burn this entire city to the ground before I ever let you disappear again. The concrete bunker, once a chamber of absolute terror, had transformed into a surreal tomb of shattered memories. Dominic Castile remained on his knees for a long time, his large hands gripping Harper's thick waist as if she might evaporate into thin air. He buried his face against her soft stomach, the ruthless leader of a structured, violent organization, reduced to a trembling, broken man. Harper stood completely still, her heart pounding a chaotic rhythm against her ribs. She was fully aware of the dangerous reality of her situation. This man, commanding armies of tactical personnel and controlling half the city's underground economy, was completely unraveled by her presence. Dominic, you have to let me go, Harper whispered, her voice trembling but surprisingly firm. She gently placed her hands on his broad shoulders, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. I am not Josephine. Josephine was a slender, naive 19-year-old girl who wore designer dresses and believed in fairy tales. Look at me. I am Harper Lane. I am 28. I am fat. I wear cheap wool sweaters, and I live a quiet, invisible life. You cannot drag me back into a world that already killed me once. Dominic slowly lifted his head. His icy blue eyes were rimmed with red, a stark contrast to his usual cold, predatory demeanor. He looked at her round face, her soft double chin, the generous curves of her body that took up space in a way Josephine never did. He did not see a stranger. He saw a survivor. He saw the woman he loved, forged in fire and resilience. I see exactly who you are, Dominic said, his voice a low, gravelly vow that sent a shiver down her spine. He stood up, towering over her, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the dimly lit room. You survived. You adapted. You built a life. I do not care about the weight, Harper. I do not care about the clothes. I care that your heart is still beating. And I will be damned if I let the Volkov Syndicate, or anyone else, threaten that heartbeat ever again. Before Harper could argue, the heavy steel door of the bunker swung open. Leo, the jagged-scarred enforcer who had abducted her, stepped inside, flanked by 2 heavily armed guards. They were elite tactical personnel, wearing dark Kevlar vests and carrying compact submachine guns. They moved with military precision, their faces devoid of emotion. "Boss, we have a perimeter breach," Leo announced, his eyes darting suspiciously toward Harper. He clearly did not understand why the Don was speaking so softly to a captive bookkeeper. Volkov foot soldiers have crossed the northern boundary of the estate. They must have tracked the SUV when we brought her in. Dominic's expression instantly shifted from vulnerable devotion to lethal authority. The Mafia boss returned, cold and calculating. "They want the decryption keys she supposedly possesses," Dominic deduced, drawing his firearm with a smooth, practiced motion. "Secure the perimeter. We are moving her to the downtown penthouse. It is heavily fortified. Prepare the armored transport." "Dominic, wait!" Harper cried out as he grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. "I told you, I do not have any keys. I am just a low-level accountant." "I believe you," Dominic said, keeping his body positioned between her and the open door, shielding her completely. "But the Volkovs do not. To them, you are a loose end, holding millions of dollars. You are a target, and you are coming with me." The extraction was chaotic and terrifying. Harper was flanked by Dominic and a squad of tactical guards as they ascended the concrete stairs into the freezing October rain. The estate grounds were plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the frantic, sweeping beams of tactical flashlights. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and impending violence. Gunfire suddenly erupted from the tree line, shattering the quiet night. Harper screamed, instinctively ducking. But Dominic was faster. He wrapped a massive arm around her shoulders, shielding her plush body with his own, and shoved her into the back of a waiting armored SUV. "Drive!" Dominic roared at the driver, slamming the heavy door shut as bullets pinged harmlessly against the bulletproof glass. The vehicle surged forward, tearing up the gravel driveway. Harper huddled in the back seat, trembling violently, her breathing shallow and frantic. She pressed her face into her hands, overwhelmed by the sudden, violent plunge back into the organized chaos she had spent 9 years running from. Dominic sat beside her, reloading his weapon with mechanical efficiency. He glanced at her, his jaw tight with concern. He reached out, his warm, calloused hand covering her trembling soft fingers. "You are safe with me," Dominic stated quietly, the conviction in his voice absolute. "They will have to put a bullet through my skull before they even get close to you." Harper looked up at him, her amber eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a long-buried affection. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why go through all this trouble for a ghost?" Dominic leaned closer, his scent of cedar and smoke enveloping her. "Because you are the only real thing in my world, Harper. You always were." The penthouse in the heart of downtown Chicago was a modern fortress in the sky, a sprawling expanse of bulletproof glass, steel and cold luxury. It was heavily guarded by Castile loyalists, a structured network of security personnel that monitored every entrance and exit. For 3 days, Harper was confined to the luxurious space. She paced the hardwood floors, feeling entirely out of place in her oversized sweatpants and t-shirts. She was a captive bird, trapped in a gilded cage, yet she could not deny the strange comfort of Dominic's constant presence. He treated her with a fierce, protective reverence, ensuring she had everything she needed while he ruthlessly hunted down the Volkov operatives responsible for the attack. However, a dramatic twist was looming, completely unseen by the syndicate's leadership. Harper's meticulous nature, honed by years of bookkeeping, could not be suppressed. Unable to sleep one night, she wandered into Dominic's private office. On his massive oak desk sat a stack of physical ledgers and financial reports detailing the Castile family's legitimate business fronts. Curiosity and boredom took over, and Harper began to casually review the numbers. Within an hour, her brow furrowed in deep confusion. She grabbed a pen and a notepad, her trained eyes rapidly catching discrepancies. There was a massive hemorrhage of funds, hidden beneath layers of shell companies. But these companies did not belong to the Volkovs. They were internal. Someone within the Castile organization was siphoning millions and masking it with amateur accounting tricks. As she traced the routing numbers, a terrifying realization washed over her. The accounts pointed directly to one of Dominic's most trusted lieutenants. The door to the office suddenly clicked shut. Harper gasped. Spinning around in the leather desk chair, standing in the doorway, a silencer-equipped pistol in his hand, was Leo. "You always were too smart for your own good, bookkeeper," Leo sneered, his jagged scar twisting into a cruel smile. He slowly advanced into the room, locking the heavy oak door behind him. "I thought killing you 9 years ago on that highway would solve my problems. When I realized you survived, I figured dumping you to the Volkovs would finish the job. But you just refused to die." Harper's blood ran cold. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with sickening clarity. "It was you," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You orchestrated the hit 9 years ago. You betrayed my family. And you raided my office because my spreadsheets were getting too close to your stolen money." "Exactly." Leo chuckled darkly, raising the pistol and aiming it squarely at her chest. "Dominic is completely blind when it comes to you. He is so obsessed with his resurrected fiancée that he ignored the rat in his own house. Now I am going to finish what I started, and this time I will make sure there is a body." Panic surged through Harper, but beneath the fear, a fierce, primal instinct for survival roared to life. She was not the frail, helpless girl from 9 years ago. She had fought tooth and nail to build her life, and she would not let this traitor take it away. She was a thick, heavy woman, and she knew exactly how to use her weight. As Leo stepped closer, preparing to pull the trigger, Harper grabbed the heavy brass desk lamp beside her and hurled it directly at his face. Leo ducked, the lamp smashing against the wall, but the distraction was all Harper needed. With a powerful surge of adrenaline, she lunged forward, throwing her entire body weight into him. Her soft, heavy frame slammed into the enforcer, knocking him off balance. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, the pistol skittering across the polished hardwood. Leo roared in anger, struggling beneath her. He struck her hard across the face, his fist connecting with her jaw. Harper tasted copper, pain exploding in her cheek, but she refused to yield. She pinned his arm down with her knee, her thick thighs providing a solid anchor as she scrambled desperately toward the discarded weapon. "Get off me, you fat bitch!" Leo snarled, managing to violently shove her aside. He lunged for the gun, his fingers grazing the metal grip. Suddenly, the office door was kicked open with explosive force. The heavy oak splintered inward, and Dominic stood in the threshold, an absolute vision of lethal fury. He did not hesitate. He did not speak. Dominic raised his weapon and fired 3 consecutive, deafening shots. Leo's body jerked violently before collapsing motionless onto the floor, a pool of dark crimson spreading across the expensive rug. Silence descended on the room, broken only by Harper's ragged breathing. She sat on the floor, her cheek bruised and bleeding, her clothes disheveled, staring at the dead man who had destroyed her family. Dominic dropped his gun and rushed to her side, falling to his knees exactly as he had in the bunker. He carefully pulled her into his arms, his large hands trembling as he assessed her injuries. "Are you hurt? Harper, look at me. Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice thick with panic and rage. "I am fine," Harper gasped, leaning her head against his broad chest, letting the reality of the moment wash over her. She looked up into his frantic blue eyes. "He was stealing from you, Dominic. He was the one who arranged the hit 9 years ago. He was the traitor." I know, my love," Dominic whispered, pressing a desperate, reverent kiss to her forehead. "He will never hurt you again. No one will ever hurt you again." Harper closed her eyes, feeling the steady, powerful thumping of his heart beneath his tailored suit. She realized, in that moment, that she could never truly escape this world. The danger, the drama, the tactical maneuvers, they were all inherently tied to the man holding her. But as Dominic held her close, treating her not as a fragile ghost, but as a strong, resilient woman, she knew she no longer wanted to run. She was Harper Lane, a beautifully thick, courageous woman, and she was exactly where she belonged. She reached up, her soft hand gently resting against his sharp jawline. "Then you better lock the doors, Dominic," she whispered softly, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. "Because I am not leaving." If you loved this thrilling Mafia romance, filled with shocking secrets, dark twists, and a love that refused to stay buried, please be sure to hit that like button today. Share this video with your fellow romance readers who crave intense, second-chance love stories with a thick, beautiful heroine. Do not forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss a dramatic chapter. Drop a comment below telling us what Dominic will do next for Harper.